Hey, folks, and welcome to another edition of Dawg Walk Talk, presented to you by DawgsHQ. As always, I'm your host, Jake Roos. With me, as always, the man, the myth, the scoop breaker. That's Palmer Toms of DawgsHQ. And with us today, a man who's along for the ride now, not just a special guest, but an integral part of the team. A man you may well know already, but you're going to get to know him a lot better and get to know his Georgia coverage a lot better. And that's the man, Wes Blankenship. Wes, welcome to DawgsHQ, brother.
Hey, it's good to be in the doghouse. Is that what y'all call this show? The doghouse?
This is Dawg Walk Talk. And
Okay.
but it is a good
It's good to be on the dog walk with you. I'll try to not commit any recruiting infractions like the Vols did at their walk.
This is very exciting for us. Wes came on just this week, actually, getting started. And if you've missed his stuff, highly encourage you to get over to DawgsHQ and check it out. Not that we weren't already kicking ass, but Wes bringing it to a whole different level, coming in with, listen, if you're able to tie Kirby Smart and Ricky Bobby together, I'm all in, man. I'm all in on it.
All right. So a little bit of context with that. Sometimes when you create these posts, there's a bit of divine intervention. And I was already going to do a breakdown on the transfer portal, Georgia's departures, and why you shouldn't panic. There's a lot of panic right now on the Georgia social media beat. But a lot of Dogs fans are just addicted to that anxiety. But I wake up that morning and I see a tweet from one of the coaches that he's taken the Kirby copter to. And I'm going to find the tweet so I can give the proper credit. But there is a statue of a panther. All right, this is from Coach Ed Hill, the athletic director, dean of students, and head football coach at St. John Paul II Catholic High in Tallahassee. And Kirby's there standing here with Coach Hill, and there's a massive statue of a panther, and it looks like the cougar from Talladega Nights. And I just immediately thought, like, Kirby's got his arm around this thing. It looked like the scene where Ricky Bobby's driving around with the cougar, and boom, light bulb went off. I had my pop culture reference of the day. So that was my second piece at DawgsHQ, and hitting the ground running with Talladega Nights. Can't complain there.
No doubt about it, man. I loved it. Next time, rather than say you went to Twitter, just say you drank some bourbon and turned on TBS and it happened to be on. I mean, it's you can tell the real story. You don't have to make up a Twitter excuse for it. Wes, talk to us a little bit about your background, man. How you came to DawgsHQ. You're a guy that I think a lot of people in the Georgia market are familiar with because of your work. The work you've done on Twitter, the work you've done on Outsider, but I think some people probably even know you back to your old news days, back when you were doing this whole thing full time back once in the past, I guess.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the three of us have similar backgrounds, just in one way or another. I started covering the team for the Red and Black when I was back in Palmer's shoes in school, as a photographer, did some video work for the newspaper. And that's really where it started for me, was covering the team, trying to get my feet wet and learn how all this stuff works. And Palmer now has every advantage that neither one of us had, Jake, with the training that Grady provides.
Well, I will say that, to my credit, I didn't get much training in journalism at Adderhold Hall.
Shout out Grady Sports. Shout out Grady Sports. Yeah.
There you go.
Shout out English Ed program.
Hey, writing is writing.
Yeah.
So that's where it started for me. And I feel like that's where I started to make some connections with the community of Georgia people. Social media was just kind of taking off at that time. And after that, I worked at WMAZ, which is the CBS station in Macon, worked at 11 Alive, the NBC station in Atlanta. And then since then, through the pandemic and gosh, all these crazy twists and turns, it feels like being in this industry again, so much has changed even in just a couple of years because of how virtual everything is, which is nuts. But that's the good thing about social media that I try to lean into is the positive community building aspect of it. And I never really lost touch with my Georgia people during that. I hosted a podcast with DJ Shockley for UGA last football season. Shock decided to, for some reason, take a sideline gig with Georgia radio, covering the team every week, and also working for Fox 5. Totally left me in the dust. So we sacrificed that show so Georgia could win a national championship this season. Started working for Outsider, which was also started by the people that started On3. So I already kind of got immersed in the culture of working for a Shannon Terry company since March of 2021. And, I live near Athens. It just makes sense for me to be involved with you guys. And within the past week, I've started making my transition back to covering the team. So a very exciting time.
Palmer coming through with the national championship Yeti flex there for everybody watching today.
Yeah.
For everybody listening. But Wes, like I said, man, you and I go way back. We've done a number of things together over the years, collaborated on a bunch of stuff. I mean, some sports extras back in the day and all that. So like I said, when I got the news, really thrilled to have you on. And honestly, I just get tired of looking at Palmer sometimes. So that's
you need to mix it up every now and then, right?
that explains the rise in guest appearances towards
no question. No question. Well, Wes, like I said, we're thrilled to have you aboard. DawgsHQ family, lucky to have you, and we're excited about it as well. Let's dive in though on some news now that we've got this trio assembled. Because there's been a lot to talk about. Let's start off, I guess, with the fresh news of the day, and that's that Bear Alexander reports, or not a report. Sources confirmed to DawgsHQ, our report, I guess, as it were. Bear Alexander, top 50 player in the nation, and one of Georgia's key signees for this 2022 class. Out probably it's looking like until summer with some labrum surgery. Pretty common injury these days. You're seeing it a lot with kids coming out of high school. It's one of those things you can do and not know that you have. And, Keely Ringo's gone through this. Nakobe Dean's gone through this. Tresman Marshall's gone through this. You can play through it. Your long-term effects are not great, obviously. Wes, I know since you're the new guy around these parts, I know that you're kind of our reaction man, our voice of reason here. I guess your feel on it. We were talking, I know, about impact freshmen, and I think some people thought Bear Alexander could possibly be one of those guys, given his skill set and given that need and some of the void that's left on that defensive line. I guess, how do you kind of see this shaping up for Georgia and Bear himself, I guess?
Yeah, I think we were talking beforehand about the similarities between this injury and Keely Ringo, and we saw how that impacted Keely. Obviously, he's recovered quite nicely, but the immediate impacts, I think it's not what you want, right? If you are an early enrollee, you hope that is mutually beneficial for the player and for the team. And with the depth at that position for Georgia in 2022 being what it is, you were really hoping for the Dogs that Bear could come out of hibernation a little bit earlier, right? And figure some things out in Athens. So, yeah, I think it's definitely just another concern on the list for how Georgia can not just rebuild, but reload next season.
It was your story, man. You broke it. I guess, how do you see this as a big setback necessarily? I guess that depends on how much you thought Bear Alexander was going to contribute.
Yeah, I'll have a roster reset story coming out here on the defensive line early next week, and I wouldn't go ahead and project Bear as a starter right off the bat, but I do think that he can have a very similar role, very similar impact as that of Jordan Davis his freshman year. So a guy, obviously Bear coming out of high school, probably a little bit more polished of a product than what Jordan Davis was, but not going to be stepping into, Athens at the same, way that Davis is stepping out of Athens. But I think that, when you look at those two, Davis had to come along a little bit, started really making a contribution for Georgia midway through that 2018 season, which feels forever ago at this point. And I feel like, Bear probably, given the fact that they are losing Jordan Davis, they are losing Devontae Wyatt, they are losing Trayvon Walker on that defensive line. You're going to be Julian Rochester, too, another guy who provided some depth for them there. You're going to be in need of some guys to step up, whether that's Zion Logue, Timon Mitchell, Bill Norton, that trio of Tennessee guys, Nazir Stackhouse, Warren Brinson. You'll be looking at some of these true freshmen from this past season to step up as well. Obviously, Jalen Carter is going to be the top guy on that defensive line, probably going to be the top guy on this entire defense. Going to be, fighting hand in hand with, Nolan Smith for that title there. But I think that you probably are going to be looking at, Bear as a contributor, given his size, being able to step in immediately. You can't coach size, and that's something that he's got. I think that he's very reminiscent of Davis. Maybe it's just the 99 jersey that he's been wearing in all of his recruiting photos, but I think that he could step in and make that kind of an impact. So, losing this spring for him is absolutely detrimental to that. But I don't think that it's something that's going to cause him to completely fall off the radar.
No, I saw him as a rotational guy as well. I think that was probably his role. Georgia exchanges those guys. I mean, look, you want to keep your big boys fresh, and they do a pretty good job of that with the depth that they've got there. So to me, Bear was a guy who was going to kind of factor in that way. I think, look, it's never ideal, of course, when anybody has to have surgery, but if you're going to have it, you're going to have a recovery. Now's the time to find that out. It's lucky they're luckier that they found it out now and that he was on campus in January than a guy signs in June, or a guy shows up in June to enroll and then you discover it, and then you're cost the whole season. And
that's what happened to Keeley that season, because he wasn't an early enrollee. He did lose that season to the injury, ultimately made his way back and was going through bowl practices with the team. But that's kind of that 6 to 9 month timeline, typical timeline that we've seen there. He was able to make it back on the earlier end of that. The expectation is that Bear is going to be able to do the same. But being able to find it in January as opposed to June, it bumps that timeline up that you're able to return.
Sure. Setback for sure. But like I said, the right time, if you're going to have a setback, is in January, and especially coming after a national championship, I guess.
Well, I think one underrated element for any position group for Georgia is just the amount of blowouts, the game control that they had in 2021, and how many games that a lot of those names that Palmer mentioned actually got to play in. I'm looking at the participation for, Brinson, for instance, Stackhouse, Stackhouse played in 10 games. How many of those reps were against like really competitive, pissed off SEC starters? Not a ton, but at least they're not quite as wide-eyed and bushy-tailed as some of the other guys might be around the league.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, like I said, a guy who the future is still plenty bright for Bear Alexander. I mean, this is in my opinion, it's a pretty minor setback. And again, this is the time that you want it to happen. And like you said, Wes, the depth has been built there. Now, one area though, where the Dogs are not as deep as they wish they were, is probably a receiver. And that coming on the heels of a couple of transfers. We saw Jermaine Burton put his name into the transfer portal. We talked about that on the last edition of Dawg Walk Talk, but now we know with some clarity where he's headed, and it's not sitting well with almost anybody, to be honest with you. And that's he's headed for Tuscaloosa now. Jermaine Burton goes with the Crimson Tide. They pluck him out of the transfer portal. And look, I know this is a Georgia show, but you got to give a lot of credit to Nick Saban because, man, he's working that transfer portal like nobody else in the country right now. Jahmyr Gibbs, Elias Ricks, you go out and get a guy like Jermaine Burton. I mean, it is what it is. The guy wins for a reason. But a lot of people very upset about this, primarily because it feels like a turncoat situation, I think, for many people, that Burton would spurn the Dogs off of the national championship and go with the team that they defeated, kind of aligning himself with the evil empire. Wes, I know that you and I talked, and Palmer all talked about this the other day, the reaction that Mecole Hardman had to it, and basically came out and said, yeah, this just doesn't sit right with me.
It was the first thing we talked about.
I think this is just the norm now. I think this is just everybody just better buckle up and get used to seeing this kind of thing, because as long as the transfer portal is in no way regulated, and I'm not even saying it should be necessarily, but as long as it's in no way regulated, you're going to see this kind of thing happen continuously.
Well, I mean, Kirby Smart benefited from an Alabama transfer his first year at Georgia. Things have opened up a lot more since then, obviously. But yeah, there's no regulation. It is completely the Wild West, and it's going to be like this until there is any kind of regulation. And I think what stings with the Jermaine situation for Georgia fans that are more prone to panic is the Stetson Bennett factor, that they are perceiving that Burton is leaving because he's dissatisfied with his production with Stetson Bennett. And I don't know. I feel like that's too simple of an explanation. I think if you looked at the way that Georgia's offense was run in 2021 and under Todd Monken in general, a lot of guys get the ball. I mean, it's not as simple to say anymore that Georgia doesn't have 1,000-yard receiver because it's RBU. It's because Georgia throws the ball to, 6-7 different guys any given game. And if Burton's prerogative is to go and be the next Jameson Williams or Mechie or, Calvin Ridley or whatever at Bama, hey, more power to him, because that's what they do over there. And Georgia's not showing that they want to do that. So I think it is just a lot of, the same hurt feelings that Georgia fans have about Bennett, the ones that aren't sold on him. And my view on this, it will not change. I mean, I've always said, as a Georgia guy, I only wanted to see one just to prove that it could happen. I'm not concerned about being, around a team that's the next Alabama. That's Kirby Smart's job to figure out how to make this the next evil empire. And if Stetson Bennett comes back and plays quarterback and, this team falls off the map, which I don't think it will, but that's what people are concerned about, then that's another part of this cake, I guess. That's another ingredient that's making people really not like the fact that Burton left to go to Alabama. I mean, he overshadowed Kimber going to Florida, which was pretty impressive, honestly. Yeah. But yeah, it's the shock factor. Mecole's reaction was interesting to me. It showed that generational difference that's happened in just a few years in college football. That a player that was playing just a few years ago in college is already like, dude, what the hell's going on here? Yeah.
No, like you said, I mean, it's like you were saying about the business earlier. It's like everything's changed so much and it's changed so fast. And, Palmer, you and I were talking about this. I mean, I think we compared the numbers. When Burton was available, it was something like 2.5 receptions a game. Jameson Williams, on the other hand, averaging 5 a game roughly over the course of his season with Alabama this past year. To me, that makes a lot of sense. If you're a guy who wants more opportunities and you're looking at your production versus what this guy did, then it seems like the opportunity is there for you. But I don't know. Maybe I'm oversimplifying it.
No, I don't think you are at all, because I think that if you look at I wrote this in the column about it. I can understand both feelings here. I can understand the Georgia fan being frustrated. That somebody that was a key contributor in that game. Let's keep in mind, Georgia might not win that game if it's not for Burton. He had 2 catches, but he also drew a pass interference. One of those catches was a long one on Georgia's go ahead touchdown drive. So if he doesn't catch that ball on first down, if he doesn't draw that pass interference, they may not move down the field that quickly. That they may it could be a completely different game. So they may not win that national championship without Jermaine Burton. And I think that if you're looking at it, you've also got to understand that last year, 2020, he was a true freshman coming into a new offensive system in a COVID season. Not, no face-to-face interactions. Oftentimes, it was a very, very weird situation, and it felt like he started to click when JT Daniels made his, appearance in the lineup. Obviously had that huge game against Mississippi State, but he also had a very good game with Stetson Bennett against Alabama, ironically. And so, you felt like he was going to make a jump. Well, sophomore season, he's banged up all of the year. Whether that's, he gets hurt in spring practice, he gets, goes through fall camp and he's banged up. Kirby told us at the beginning of the season that he thought, he probably that Jermaine hadn't practiced but maybe 10 to 15 times in 8 months. And so that was a situation where he was banged up. Obviously he deals with a groin injury mid-season that keeps him out against Auburn, limits him to just one, couple plays here and there against Kentucky. No catches against the Wildcats. You felt like he started to come into his own a little bit at the end of the season with a big game against Michigan, a big game against Alabama, like we talked about there. But at the same time, you've also got to understand that with Alabama, there has been so much production at the wide receiver position. Guys being picked in the first round, Julio Jones, Amari Cooper, Calvin Ridley, all those guys are old examples now, because you've got 4 guys that have been picked in the first round the last 2 seasons. Like you said, with the stats, looking at comparing the stats there, Jamison Williams had more catches, yards, and touchdowns in this single season than Jermaine has had over 2 years at Georgia. And so if you're going to leave Georgia for anywhere, it makes sense that it would be Alabama. But at the same time, like I said, I can understand the frustration that Georgia fans are feeling towards the situation. But you can also understand the move that he's making. And a guy like, we've talked about Mecole, coming at him a little bit. Guy like Eric Stokes, who was one of Mecole's teammates early on in his career, but also, played in a little bit more of the transfer portal era of college football, saw a starting quarterback, at Ohio State that had played at Georgia, not naming any names there. He understands it and said, he's doing what's best for his career. Why do you have to worry about anyone else? So I can understand that side of things too.
No, yeah, I get it. I mean, I think, yeah, it goes both ways. It works in both ways for sure. We got our man Wes on the move. Scoop's breaking. He's got to go track it down. So we'll keep rolling here. Burton, listen, I agree with you, Palm. If you're gonna make the move, it's hard to go against Alabama if you're gonna pick somewhere else to go. I think that's just the nature of the business. But speaking of going other places, we've got signing day right around the corner next Wednesday. A couple names Georgia fans will be watching out for. If you've been keeping track over at DawgsHQ, we've had a lot of the movement tracked by coaches, the in-home visits. A really interesting one to watch, I think, moving forward and moving into next Wednesday is that of Andrew Paul out of Texas. This is a kid who came on to the board, and I tell people this happens every year, and I feel like people just don't believe me, but like Brett Seither was like this. There are guys who emerge after these early signing periods that just explode. And Andrew Paul is one of these kids. I mean, he's a great back. Go watch the film on him. I like the tape. Big kid. Georgia, I think a little in flux with the Jordan James situation, and whether or not he will be a Bulldog next Wednesday. As of right now, I'm predicting that he will not be. But this is a day-to-day thing, as everything in recruiting is. But the fact that they're pushing all in on Paul feels like a pretty good indicator of how they feel and where they stand with the whole thing. They're going to push for an official visit this weekend. As of right now, I believe that is the expectation, that Paul will end up in Athens this weekend. Was originally slated to go to Oregon, has been to Clemson already. Clemson felt really good about where they stood with it. I'm just going to say Georgia looks like they're in a strong position moving into next Wednesday. What's going to be interesting and what we don't have a good feel on is if this kid is going to go ahead and make a decision on Wednesday. Because if it were me personally, I wouldn't. I would carry this thing out a little bit longer, maybe take a few more trips, kind of get a better feel for all of this, but teach their own. So Andrew Paul, definitely a guy to watch out for when it comes to
Jake,
Georgia recruiting.
Give us a little bit of explanation here on how things work there. You said if he's going to make his decision Wednesday, that's considered to be National Signing Day. Sure. People consider that to be the end of this class. Talk to us a little bit about how that would work if he's not to make his decision.
I think everybody does expect those things, but at the same time, you don't have to do it. The window doesn't close. So you can choose. February 2nd, or the first Wednesday in February, is when this period begins, essentially. The window doesn't really shut after that for the rest of the 2022 class. So you can, the reality is you don't even have to sign anything. You don't have to sign a letter of intent. Roquan Smith did this a few years back, if you'll remember. I remember that one pretty well. He opted not to sign a letter of intent, signed his financial aid paperwork, which binds the university to him, not him to the university. And he just showed up and enrolled. And at that point, obviously you're somewhat beholden to them at that point, but as a recruit, if you sign your national letter of intent, you're bound to the school. Now in the transfer portal era, we've seen kids sign their NIL or their NLI, and then flip right over and then enter the transfer portal almost immediately. Or, it's happened. It opens up a lot of possibilities, but this kid can realistically carry this thing as long as he wants to. He can carry until June. Assuming he wants to play college football next fall, he better be in camp when summer begins, but he can carry it that far. And there's really not anything anybody can do about it. My expectation is that he won't. Most guys don't do that. Most guys don't push it that far. I'm just saying the possibility is on the table. And I think that, there's an opportunity, if you're a kid like this, where all of your opportunities emerge so quickly, to give yourself some breathing room and give yourself some time and give yourself a chance to kind of work through all of this and not be overwhelmed by the hoopla about it. I think that's, another key component to this whole thing. Andrew Paul,
Jake, how do you feel like the transfer portal and the split signing days? This is a big picture question, but I'm just curious, how has it changed the way you cover things and just the general process of everything?
It's a total insano move. It's totally changed everything about everything. There's no way to cover it in the same way. So, the transfer portal is what it is. It's different. It's a whole different element. It's the same. It's essentially the same thing, but you're having to recruit your own roster as opposed to just the high school kids now. So, I think that it's a situation where you've got to be working both of those angles at all times. And as far as how I cover it, I just pray to God every morning, and I just move from that place that I can somehow keep track of all of this madness. But Andrew Paul, just one piece of this moving into next week. Georgia going in home with Kristen Miller on Thursday night. That's a very key one to watch. Smoke has been positive for the Dogs when it comes to Kristen Miller of late, from what I've heard. Now, Oregon's in the mix for this, but I don't consider them a serious contender. I think ultimately this boils down to who we always thought it was going to boil down to, and that's the Ohio State Buckeyes and the Georgia Bulldogs. I've been told that there is, it's a 50-50 split right now. But it seems like it's trending a lot more Georgia than it was in the early signing period. Had he signed in the early signing period, I'm pretty confident he would have been an Ohio State Buckeye. Moving into next week, I feel really good about where Georgia stands. I think Georgia should too. He's taken some OVs. He's had a chance to get around. He's obviously, like I said, gone to Oregon and gotten away from home and had a chance to kind of experience all of that. But it's something to watch. We'll see how it goes. Kristen, a consistent guy for Georgia fans to continue to watch. EJ Lightsey in the mix for next week as well. Linebacker out of Fitzgerald, Georgia, guy that people probably have gotten familiar with, I would hope, over the last month. Things really kind of exploded for him after the early signing period. Things didn't work out with Florida. He reopens things, and Georgia kind of comes barreling in. Was told that he had a great official visit, and I feel confident about where Georgia stands there as well. Last name to be watching for, probably Shamar Stewart, the 5-star defensive lineman out of Monsignor Pace in Opelika, Florida. A guy who just a tough read, man. I don't know that anybody knows what Shamar is going to do. He's a nice kid, but he's very difficult when you speak to him to kind of get a good read on where his head's at. He doesn't show his cards at all. And so, I like where Georgia stands with him. I was told after the official visit that they picked up some momentum there. Are they still the third of 3 teams? I don't know, but I don't know who is right now. I still, to some degree, I think A&M still the front runner. Mario Cristobal has made him a big focus since arriving in Miami. That's another piece of this too. But Georgia, OV went really well. Dogs were in home this week. You got to feel good about it. I mean, top 3 is a good chance. And, if he's going to go out of state, Athens is sort of the midpoint between, College Station and Miami. So I don't know. I'm not going to project him to Georgia right now. I think that would be a little presumptuous, but I will say Georgia not out of this moving into next week. And to me, Shamar could be an 11th hour guy.
And of course, if they were to add 4 guys like that, they'd have to make some room in the transfer portal. Open up some spots, because like we mentioned on our last show, about 90 or so guys on scholarship by our count, at least. And so, you add 4, you're getting closer and closer to 100 than you are 85. But yeah, that's certainly something to watch, as you enter spring. You come out of spring, and if Georgia's going to either pick up some guys on Wednesday or pick up some guys in the transfer portal, they're going to need to lose some guys in the process as well.
Yep. No doubt about it. I mean, they have to. It's a must. And luckily, though, Kirby Smart has proved himself really adept at this. He and his staff, they've got people dedicated to these kinds of things, the workarounds, roster management numbers, back counters versus forward counters versus – I'll be totally honest with you. I know that this is my job and I work in this industry. There's a lot of that shit that I do not understand. I have no concept of how it works. I don't know how they know how it works. I've tried to find the NCAA bylaws on these things and tried to read the wording, and I just don't know where this stuff is or how anybody figures out how to do it. But
it's a mystery.
Yeah, more power to them, I guess. Guys, I think that's about it for me. And unless you got a little something else, Wes, you want to shout out something to the people here before we kick off here?
I just want to shout out you guys and appreciate you having me on the team, and just appreciate everyone that's already following the site, signing up for it. Go ahead and
Nice.
Follow our social media, active on Twitter and Instagram.
Yeah, absolutely. Palm, you got anything?
No, just excited to have Wes on. He's got a very unique voice. One that is really interesting to read. Very excited to have him on. Hopeful that it as we continue to build this thing, he's certainly a important piece in doing so. So excited for that, and excited for everything that's to come.
Yeah, I think Wes has a unique voice, both speaking and in writing. So I'm looking forward to all of his contributions.
Thank you, I think.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to all of his contributions. And like I said, Palm, the scoop, man, get over and check it out. Lots of stuff breaking over at DawgsHQ. We got you covered on the news. We got you covered on recruiting. We got you covered on opinion. We got the podcast. We do a little bit of it all. And we hope that you'll come check us out if you haven't already. For the whole DawgsHQ crew, Wes Blankenship, Palmer Toms, I'm Jake Roos. This has been another edition of Dawg Walk Talk presented to you by DawgsHQ. Thanks for tuning in.